Hey there, it's Dr. Mike T. Nelson back with another podcast here for you. I think you'll really enjoy this one. We got to chat with my buddy Jake Tuura from jackedathlete.com, and we took a deep dive down the rabbit hole of all things related to patellofemoral injury, pain, tendons. There are ways you could potentially speed up the healing process. So if the area kind of around the kneecap is bothering you, what are some things you could do? Talk a little bit more about collagen, some long and short duration isometrics. How do isometrics actually change potentially the collagen structure, and what are they doing for the muscle? Also had a few side rants about reflexive performance reset, RPR, and be activated training from Douglas Heel. That's how we initially met several years ago. So I think you will enjoy this podcast here. As always, this is brought to you by the Flex Diet Certification. Go to flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET.com. And you'll be able to get on the wait list there via the newsletter. And once it is open for enrollment again, you'll have a first crack at getting in. So if you want 8 different interventions that are all ranked for you about what to do for nutrition and recovery, everything from protein to carbohydrates to micronutrition, fasting, sleep, and much more, go to flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET.com, and enjoy this chat with my buddy from Jacked Athlete, Jake Tuura. Here today with Jake Tuura. Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yeah, that's good enough.
Is it good enough? What is it? How do you actually say it?
Tuura, whatever's good. Usually people just spell it wrong with 2 R's instead of 2 U's.
Okay.
But I don't know the exact pronunciation, actually.
Great. And I know we initially met at Be Activated through Doug Heel, which became part of RPR. What I think we're saying 4 years ago now, something like that, I think.
Yeah, it had to be 4 years because I was still at Minnesota Duluth.
Yeah.
And that was like a winter time, yeah.
Cool. And what are you doing now for people who may be under a rock and not know who you are?
Yeah, so that was when I was at Minnesota Duluth, and then after that, it was a summertime. I just applied everywhere, and now I'm at Youngstown State University in Ohio. So I've been here for 3 years now, and trained 7 or 8 teams. So it's quite a bit, but it's a lot of fun, and I get a chance to experiment with a lot of athletes. So continuing to do that, and then I also do stuff online. So most of my experiments are run on myself, and then if they work, I do them with the athletes.
That's always good. How many athletes do you have approximately?
I don't know, man. It because it kind of increases because we just added a men's swim team last year, and we just had it. The coach just had to basically throw on anyone he could, and now he's recruiting more people. So it must be, I don't even know. It must be 120, 130, maybe something like that. Swim team is so big, and then women's soccer, but it works okay for the most part. Now, once the virus thing with social distancing and stuff, I don't know how that's gonna work. We're still figuring that out.
Yeah, you guys don't have any plans yet for when you come back? It's just kind of
well, we've already started actually. We started.
Oh, you did? Interesting.
Yeah, because we're in the Horizon League, which is a mid-major Division I league,
Okay.
And the other schools do not have football. We're the only school that has football, so they're in the Missouri Valley. I don't personally train football; the other strength coaches do. But because we have football, we had to push to get in the weight room and start training, and then we left it available for all the athletes. We just have to do things like daily health questionnaires and temperature checks and all this stuff, wearing the masks, social distancing, cleaning absolutely every piece of equipment after sessions, not sharing anything. So we've done that, but once the entire teams, because right now it's just optional stuff, so I have pretty small groups. But once the whole teams come, it's we're going to be using big spaces, probably a lot of med balls. We got sandbags. We probably won't even be using barbells and stuff or dumbbells because
be outside.
Just too much to clean up, man. Too many people get in the way. And I don't know what the rules are going to be, but if we still have those restrictions, it's going to have to. I mean, maybe I'll just do a lot of long duration isometrics. Although there's not many athletes who enjoy that type of stuff,
That sounds utterly horrible, actually.
Yeah, yeah, dude. I mean, for myself. So like for myself, last winter, I had pneumonia last November, and then I was coming back from that. It took me a while, and then I did 5-minute iso lunge every day. Like I accumulated it. I never got to a straight 5-minute iso lunge, but I just did it every single day, and then I got back into heavy lifting. But it's like, yeah, man, when you do it with athletes, you're like, oh, we got to do this again. It's like, come on. Like, you know, I did this like every single day, and it sucks because there's no way out. There's no way you can hide. You know, if I tell you do 100 reps of a lunge, it's like you can cheat. You can push your hip forward or push you know, like go shorten the range of motion, bounce out of the bottom, use elastic energy. But if I'm like hold this spot for as long as you possibly can, you have to go to a place where it's just intense pain and just hang out there. So not many people enjoy it, but I think there are definitely big benefits to doing it.
Yeah, and that's one of the topics I wanted to get into today. And when you're holding an isometric lunge, are you doing top position, bottom position? Like for people who are listening and kind of new to this, like what would be the position or positions you would start with?
Yeah, so I'm aware of like the extreme iso lunge. I've done my best to never use that term because I am not familiar.
Jay Schroeder, right?
Yeah, yes, and I'm not super familiar with him.
Yeah.
I am familiar with the small amount of stuff that's out there that he is available, which is pretty much nothing that I found.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to use like extreme iso lunge because then people will be like, dude, you're not doing the correct technique. You're not pulling into position and doing all the things that he talked about.
That was one of the questions I had, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, like, the whole reason I got into the iso lunge was I've had patellar tendinopathy. I had it for about 3 years. Like, I had it bad, and then I did heavy squatting. That helped. I couldn't really get back into dunking. I still have pain.
So heavy squatting helped. I think that's probably something people would not expect to hear.
Yeah. So let me. So okay, our main thing was we're going to talk about the iso lunge. Let me go back to when I was
Tell us
in
the
high
story.
school. I was a basketball guy in high school. Like I loved basketball. A poor athlete, terrible, no explosiveness, no strength, no muscle mass, whatever. So I've been able to cultivate that over this whole time. But I experimented with multiple vertical jump programs, and now looking back in hindsight, a lot of them are garbage because there's just so much volume of plyometrics and not much structural development.
I just do more plyos and get better. That's the answer, right? Just more jumping, right?
Yeah,
I just have to do more jumping.
I think like there are people, I feel like the people who have 40-inch, 50-inch verticals, like a lot of those people genetically can do a lot of plyos, just do a lot of jumping because the best way to get good is do the specific task.
Yeah.
They can do just a lot of jumping and they might not need any of the structural stuff and they get a 40 or 50-inch vertical. But that might be like the 1% of kids.
Yeah.
99% of other people are going to get jumper's knee if you just jump over and over. Like your patellar tendon is not ready for that. So that was me. I did vertical jump programs. I did one by Luke Lowry, which was called like the vertical blueprint. It was like the 50-inch vertical. It was crazy. A ton of jumping. It was meant for more advanced athletes. I should not have done it, but I did it anyways. And I left that summer. I did it. I think I dunked a basketball for like the first time, which was awesome. But then I had jumper's knee, terrible jumper's knee. And I had it for like 3 years, and doctors told me to rest. They gave me PT with like slow body weight eccentrics. None of this stuff worked for me. And then I actually started daily squatting, like Bulgarian squatting. And that was the only thing that helped my patellar tendon decrease pain. I wouldn't have pain. Like I had pains sitting in a car. I had pain, walking so even without
upstairs. Movement.
Yeah, pain all the time. And I guess with patellar tendon or tendon issues, like if you sit there and do nothing, that can be painful because it like accumulates water or whatever for some reason. I was talking with Jill Cook about that. They don't really know why it happens, I guess. But sitting in a car was so painful. But anyways, I did the daily squatting, and that was actually stressing my knee because it was like a high bar squat. My knees were coming forward quite a bit. I stressed my knee. It got a lot better, but I still go back into jumping, and I would still have patellar tendon pain if I did tried 3 jumping sessions in a week. I still would have patellar tendon pain. So fast forward, I got to Youngstown. I wrote my vertical jump protocol, and I still was having issues. And then I think one of my buddies sent me a Keith Barr YouTube video about isometrics for tendons. And then I watched that, and then I started putting a lot of content out about that. And then that was when like Joel Smith was aware of what I was doing, and then Joel Smith had Keith Barr on his podcast. But I had been experimenting this was around the time Joel Smith released his speed strength book too. So in the book, he had the isometric lunge, and he was talking about the isometric lunge. I don't know what he was talking about with the benefits, but I just started doing that every day. And then Tommy John was in there too in my brain of like he was starting to implement that stuff. So I did the single leg standing, the isometric lunge, and I was mainly doing that for my patellar tendon because I wanted to do the isometric hold to target my patellar tendon to heal. And then I don't know, it took me maybe a month of doing that every single day. And then it's like I could dunk basketballs on any court any day I wanted, no patellar tendon pain, which is awesome because I had that for 3 years.
That's crazy.
But now I've kind of advanced my knowledge to realize like what the isometric lunge is probably doing, what are better options to speed that up and make the patellar tendon more resilient. And it's the isometric lunge. I think one of the main benefits is like, I think if you're doing a lot of bilateral stuff, like think of a deadlift or think of a squat is like your rectus femoris muscle, however you pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it. Like you're never really lengthening that out, if you're doing squatting, you're doing deadlifting, because like you're always in a flexed position. So you get in an isometric lunge for someone like me who had never really done single leg training, a whole lot of single leg training. And I started doing single leg stuff like that or weighted split squats. And that cleared up my knee pain quite a bit. I've heard so many anecdotes of that as well. So I think we can look at doing the exercises to target the patellar tendon, but I think you also need a rec fem that is actually strong and long, not just like locked up. But it can be individual, But yeah, dude, that's the whole thing with the isometric lunge. I got into it for the tendon, and now I'm mainly looking at it for let's make sure that I can do that so my hips aren't like stuck in an anterior tilt because my quads are tight or whatever, But it's also big for strength endurance, Like your foot needs to connect with your hip, and if you can hold that position, I think if you do that for like 3 to 5 minutes every single day,
Oof.
I think you'd be a lot less likely to have knee pain. Patellar tendon pain, patellofemoral pain, pretty much any type of knee pain. Although you might have to play with the position because a deep position can be painful for patellofemoral, like a deep knee flexion. A deep knee flexion can also be painful for patellar tendon. So like I've had people reach out to me and say, dude, this makes my knee pain worse. And it's like, well, those don't go as low. Find out what works for you. Maybe that's not the right exercise, Like, Corey G, he's out in Ohio here. Corey G Fitness, Corey Gregory.
I know the name. That's about it. I don't know who he is personally.
He's trying to dunk now. He's like 40-some years old. He's trying to dunk basketball, but he suffered with patellar tendon pain. So he started trying the isometrics, and I think he said the iso lunge actually hurt his knees. So he was doing like the slant board squats, board bilateral. But it's like find something that works for you and see if it decreases pain over time. And with tendons, it could take a long time because in the past we had said that the turnover is very slow and the metabolic demand, like there's not much metabolic rate. But then you have the opposite recently where they say that it's actually really fast, like Keith Barr talks about it being very fast. And they show like there was a study by Hennemeyer in like the core of the Achilles tendon. They showed that it doesn't turn over after the age of 17. So like doctors would tell me that of like, okay, you're older than 17, your tendon is not turning over. Or they tell me it's going to take 3 months for that tissue to turn over. And I'm basically waiting around for nothing. I'm not even training it because I'm just waiting for it to turn over. Like that's not going to help anything. But then they see that if you have a tendinopathy in the tendon, it actually is like an accelerated rate. So who knows why that's happening, but it is interesting stuff. And that's why I love tendons, because we know so little about them that it's a chance for me to reach out to the researchers and learn stuff and then share that with other people.
Yeah, I've always, people can find videos of me quoting. I think I got it from Christopher Summer, and that muscle turnover is about 90 days and soft tissue turnover is about 9 months, which I guess has further been debunked now. I said something about slow rates of soft tissue turnover like 6 months ago, and like I had a couple of people just yell at me and send research papers about how we've known this for supposedly decades, and it turns out it was still relatively new information. But why do you think people then injure tendons and soft tissue more than muscle in general?
Yeah. Well, I don't like to talk about all of them because like upper body tendons, I don't really know. Achilles tendon, it can be a typical tendinopathy, or it can be like you can have it in the middle where it's like just too much range of motion, like swimmers who had to kick their plantar flex, dorsiflex a lot. So you can have like aggravation of the sheath around it, which you don't really get at the patellar tendon. But I try to specialize in the patellar tendon because that's what I care about. But I think people run into the patellar tendon issues because they just do too much volume of the store and release activities. Like lifting heavy weights is not stressful on your tendons, unless you're like an Olympic lifter and you're catching a clean at like the bottom, and like exploding out. That might be stressful on your quadriceps tendons. You might get quadriceps tendinopathy by doing a deep catch like that. But in general, if you're lifting heavy weights, you're not going to get tendon issues. So I think the reason you're going to see a lot of people with tendon issues who are like basketball athletes or who are volleyball athletes, football athletes, because they're doing all the explosive activities. And the idea that Keith Barr talks about is like your muscle is not as strong as your tendon is stiff. So like if you have a stiff tendon because you're just doing a lot of the sport activity, that can end up with you can have muscle ruptures or muscle tears at your hamstring. But your question was why there's more tendon issues.
And I could be wrong on that. That just seems to be my perception from the average person going to the gym.
Well, okay, yeah. So
I know sprinters are like a different class altogether.
Yeah. Are you saying as far as tendon issues with just regular people that lift weights, or
it just seems to me like most of the clients, if I think back over time, rarely do I hear someone has injured a muscle. It usually seems like they've injured soft tissue more than muscle. And again, that's just my anecdotal guess at the data.
Yeah. I mean, I don't work with like general population like that, or I usually work with people who like are maintaining a certain level of fitness. But it seems like tendons, if you change the load of anything, because any type of activity is somewhat demanding, the explosive stuff is way more demanding on tendons. But if you go from being a couch potato to going and like lifting weights, and there's any velocity demand at all, I guess that would be demanding on the tendon. And you might not be ready for that, because like anytime you change load suddenly, your tendon is not going to like it. So maybe that's what's going on. But for me, it's like I can see if an athlete doesn't have like a consistent dose of like jumping and sprinting activities, and then you just add them in 1 week or 1 day, like you could just push them over the edge, and they could get like a reactive tendinopathy, where then you need to intervene and do some things to make them feel better. Whereas the best thing is probably just to keep the load more consistent throughout time. But I think that's probably the issue. People change loads too fast, and then their tendons end up flaring up. Muscles will just get sore, and then you'll heal, but your tendon flares up, and it's like, that's not good. And I can't tell you, because I've talked to the researchers, and it's like, they still don't, there's a lot of stuff they don't know, which is interesting. And there's a lot of stuff that they disagree on. Like I've had Jill Cook and Keith Barr seem to be on very different pages,
I noticed that. I listened to your podcast on that, and I guess I'm more on the Keith Barr side, which we'll get into, but I don't know. I don't spend my life doing the research like they do either, so it's hard for me to say.
Yeah, it's so like Jill. It seems like Keith does the stuff with like engineered ligaments,
Yes.
Like he's actually looking at the so he can get a good idea of what's happening at the tendon, and it seems like. But he also gets case studies. He also works with people. So
yeah, he works with real athletes too. I talked to Stu Phillips about that too, because Stu was kind of giving him a bad time about collagen and some of that stuff, and he was kind of half sort of joking because they're friends. But yeah, it's interesting how even each researcher has their own bias, because obviously Stu Phillips' lab is primarily looking at muscle, right? So everyone's going to intrinsically have their own bias of what they're looking at, and that's kind of how they view the world too.
Yeah, and I've never taken I don't think I've ever taken a collagen supplement. I mean, I've had a bar, but I've never like bought the protein and have consumed it regularly. But it seems like Keith Barr really supports that. And then he supports the idea, and apparently he has some case studies where there shows benefit, but then Jill Cook is like, this is completely useless because it doesn't get integrated into the matrix. And it's like, okay, who's right and who's wrong? And it's kind of hard to, like the Bruce Lee thing, like take what's useful and discard it, because I don't really know what's what's good or what's bad. So it's like, just try a bunch of things. Yeah. But man, I think the issue is being consistent with it, because like once you have a jumper's knee issue, it could take you months to get to feel better. It could take you such a long time that I wrote my jumper's knee protocol. And it's a lot of it is education. It's like 2 hours of video of just education on the patellar tendon, because the more you can know about it, you can go make your own choices, because there can never be a specific prescription for you need to do 5 sets of 45-second leg extension at this range of motion, because that could hurt somebody, and it could be the best thing in the world for another person. Some person might take collagen and see huge benefits. Some person might take it and see nothing. It's like you have to be consistent with it, and it could take you months or weeks. It could take you a long time to actually start to see benefit. So that's what's so difficult with it.
Yeah, I'm going to have used for the listeners some of the Keith Barr stuff. I started maybe, God, is it 2 years ago now, I think? So he put out some very interesting research. Again, when I talked to Stu, it's in engineered ligaments, which means that it's ex vivo. So they are doing these destructive tests in the lab, which on one hand, you're like, oh, but it's not in the human body. On the other hand, like, who's going to go in and get a biopsy of their ACL? You know what I mean? So there's some things that I think are hard to do practical, but his recommendation is, 15 grams of collagen, 40 to 60 minutes before exercise, maybe some vitamin C. That's kind of gone back and forth if it matters or if it doesn't. So I started doing that with clients, about like 2 years ago, because at the time, my assumption, which again has probably been proven not true, is that, well, what if like soft tissue turnover is just like the rate limiter, right? If it really is 9 months, can we do something to accelerate that? And I'm like, well, what's the downside? Is collagen really going to be bad in any way other than maybe it hurts their pocketbook a little bit? It's kind of a pain in the ass to do. Not really. There's no data to show that it's bad. So I'm like, okay, here's a potential upside. It's unbounded. We're not really sure. The downside, we're pretty clear that it's not going to make anyone worse. Collagen, unfortunately, not going to do anything for muscle recovery. And again, who knows? It's a handful of people. It's anecdotal, but it appeared to help. But again, I'm doing their training, I'm doing their nutrition, I'm doing their HRV, I'm looking at their stress, so you're looking at all these other factors at the same time. Because no one's going to pay me an obscene amount of money to be like, I'm just going to do collagen and isos for a year and a half. Great. Like, no one's going to do that. That'd be great for an experiment, but it's not going to happen either. So we're always left with these like fuzzy signal to noise things. We're always like trying to figure out, I think, over time as practitioners are trying to take research and apply it to people too.
Yeah, it's, man, I was listening to a podcast by the barbell medicine guys. Some interesting. It was on Patellar Tendinopathy, and they were talking about the pain generator. Like when we talk about a tendon issue, we focus so much on the specific tendon, and I feel like if we're taking collagen, it's like we think there's something wrong there, but there's also an effect at the nervous system and the brain. It's like, is that what's going on? Could that be? There's what is causing the pain in the first place? And I think they say that it is local, but it's also a brain mechanism that's happening. I mean, obviously, whenever there's pain, it would be involved with the brain. But yeah, that's what makes it tough. I guess when any case of pain, like when we did the B-activated RPR thing, it's like, this stuff can work, but I mean, how much of it is placebo? How much of it is that the mechanism you're explaining is what is causing the relief? And then what Doug is like, who cares? You get better, you get better.
Yeah, I did some of that stuff beforehand. I did a bunch of stuff from Z Health. And one of the experiments I did was people would come in and like, oh, I've got low back pain. It's not bad enough to see a PT and it's interfering with my training. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's try some stuff. And the question they would always ask, which is a good question of, oh, hey, my glute med or whatever is not working as well. Could this cause the back pain I had? Because my back pain feels great now. And initially I was like, oh no, there's no research to prove that. That's crazy talk. I don't think so. And oddly enough, those people kept coming back. I'm like, wait a minute. So the next time, this happened like 5 times in a row over the course of like 6 months. So the next time someone asked me the same question, hey, is this what's causing my, low back issues? My glutes not working as well. And I'm like, yes, that could definitely be the cause. And I'm probably not. Sure as shit, they didn't come back again. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then I'm like, is part of the error correction system in the brain with pain the fact that you need to close that loop, right? That your brain thinks that, oh, he didn't really sound so confident that that was the issue. I think there's something still wrong with me. I think there's an error in the system which is creating pain. But if you close that loop and be like, yep, I think that's what it was, did you probably placebo them into it to some degree? Yes. But if you're a clinician and they don't come back and they don't have pain and their movement is fine, they don't see an injury, did you make them worse or did you actually make them better? You know what I mean? And so I drove myself batshit crazy for years going back and forth on that.
That's what makes it tough with like strength coaching too, is like we can, or I guess coaching in general, anything, you can try to be as objective as possible, but then you play in someone's perception.
Yes.
And then all the objects, like that's not objective at all. There's nothing objective about it. But that has a huge influence on someone's results. So I don't know where I stand with it, because it's like, yes, have objective principles, but then I guess leave the room for someone's perception. And maybe you're not the right person to decrease pain for them. Maybe someone else's terminology is going to be more effective for them to buy into it or get a placebo effect out of it, you know?
Yeah. And anytime I test any new therapies, just as a general word, or interventions, I always try to grab people who have a nocebo effect, right? So I'll explain it to them like, hey, what is this? I rub on your chest and your breathing gets better. They're like, oh my God, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. Perfect. Come on over. Because in my head, I'm like, if they have a nocebo, right, they think that this is not going to work for them at all. If whatever I'm doing is enough to overcome that, I'm like, maybe there's something kind of to it. So like for the RPR be activated, and full disclosure, I teach for RPR. And even now, after doing it for like 4 years and teaching it and seeing just like the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life, I still don't really know what I'm doing per se. Like I know what I'm doing. I have like the whole thing mapped out in my head. But if you came to me and said, okay, what exactly is going on? I don't know. I mean, I can give you some crazy half-hour explanation about error corrections in the system and fascial lines and all sorts of stuff. Is it right? I don't know. But then if you go, well, what's the actual research on it? There's like 2 studies that were abstracts that were presented. One showed benefit, one didn't. And that's like what we have of like the actual data on it as a therapy. But yet, I don't think there's much of a downside. I mean, I've seen people have stuff they had for 30 years they've been working on, and after one session leave and never had it again either. You know, so
yeah,
I don't know. It still makes my brain hurt.
Yeah, I use it a lot. I don't use it so much anymore. But I was kind of looking at it of like, sometimes it can be like a Band-Aid, you know, where it's sure. Someone's anything like, I can't sprint because I need to do my wake up drills or something. Like, man, I think that's messed up. You know, you should be able to do that. So that was one aspect where I'm like, I kind of shied away from it. Although I did, I had a basketball girl with my first year and second year. She had like, one of my best players had really bad knee pain, and so many doctors looked at her, they never knew what was going on. And then I would do a full session before every game, and that was like the only thing that actually would decrease her pain and allow her to play more, which was huge. But why did it work? I don't freaking know.
Yeah.
It just worked, and it didn't seem like anything else was doing it for her. So that was cool. But those are like select athletes for me, because I have so many of them. It's like, if there's someone with like a really bad problem, well, it's worth experimenting, you know, if the traditional stuff is not working for them.
Yeah, and especially I know that even doing it, I'm seeing a very biased population, right? Because everyone's like, well, you're just convincing these people to do it. I'm like, no, I charge them $200 a session, and I tell them it's going to suck really bad. That's going to be extremely painful. They're like, whoa, but couldn't help me? I'm like, I don't know. We can try it and see what happens. Like, literally, that's my entire sales speech. And I know that will only filter out and get people who are highly motivated to make a change. But on the flip side, a lot of those people are the same people who have been motivated to see a difference for like 10 years and nothing else has worked either. You know, so so now I'm just like, I don't know, let's just try it and see what happens. And you do it long enough and you see like the first time I asked Cal what's convincing me, he's like, oh, you got to do this. I mean, this guy fly in from South Africa. I'm like, well, what is this therapy you're talking about? What is it, Cal? He's like, crazy shit, man, crazy shit. And I'm like, you want me to pay this guy $1,500 just for, I don't even know what it is. He's like, oh, man, you'll love it. You'll love it. I'm like, okay, great. So we go to Paleo Effects that year Cal was presenting. We're at the speaker's dinner. I'm sitting next to Cal. I'm like, hey, man, who's this crazy guy from like South Africa and paying you like $1,500 to learn some system that I don't know anything about? He's like, oh man, stand up, stand up. I'm like, okay. So we're at like the speaker dinner. He puts his arm around me and hits the spot between the ribs and the top part of the hip and just does this like side noogie of death on me. So Cal's got his arm around me doing this side noogie of death, and I'm like screaming. I'm like, oh God, this hurts. Ah! Like everybody stops and like looks over like, what are these two people doing? And then I sit down and he's like, crazy shit, man, crazy shit. I'm like, you didn't tell me anything about this other than now I know it hurts really bad and I don't know what the hell is going on. So, yeah.
The biased population, like, because I definitely see that. Like, if I was someone, I've always been someone that's like, if someone's gonna increase my performance, let's do it, and I'm already bought into it, like I want to believe in it because it's gonna make me better. But yeah, doing it, if you do it on people that don't really care, like, yeah, it's probably not gonna work. They don't even want to get better. Like an example I think of, like I tell a lot of the athletes that when I sleep, I tape my mouth shut and I wear a nose strip, so I nasal breathe.
Yep.
And I'll explain why, it helps me sleep better, helps me perform better, all these benefits. They still won't do it. It makes no sense to me why you would not do that, If I just told you this is going to make your life better, this is going to make you a better athlete, and you won't do it because you think it's weird, like that is messed up. So it's like those are the type of people where it's like I don't want to do a session on you. You don't really care to increase your performance. I don't relate to you,
Yeah.
But it's the person that's like, you tell them that, and then they go tape their mouth shut for the next 10 years, and then you see them down the line like, dude, I'm going to tape my mouth shut for the last decade. It's been awesome. It's like, that's the type of person that they don't care about looking stupid. Their main goal is to increase their performance, or just feel better. So it's like, yeah, definitely you get the person that wants to pay that amount of money or go through all the pain. It's probably in their best interest to get results from it, or they're going to look like an idiot for, that investment. You right?
Yeah. And the other thing I did too was I'm like, how many people are actually going to come back? You know what I mean? Because it's one thing to do a single session, and to my shock, like most people did come back. And so then I'm like, okay, how about nobody pays until afterwards? So like if you come over, you do it, and you're like, that was incredibly painful. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. Cool. I don't want your money. Like just leave. I don't care. And so far, like 256 sessions later, like nobody is not paid.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I did some sessions for free. Similar result. So then I started doing Oura Ring, HRV, resting heart rate, performance tests. Yeah, most of them went up. But again, even like HRV, we know that the state of your brain will affect also the outcome because that also controls stress too. So it's again, that's probably why we have, double-blind, research-controlled trials. And then you're left with, like we're talking about with tendons and stuff. Okay, who's going to give a biopsy of their tendon in a human? Like, especially a high-level athlete. Like, yeah, good luck. I don't think that's going to happen. So until we have other technology or jam you in an MRI with a certain stain to look at your tissue or something, we're going to be left with this very limited data and these weird signal-to-noise things we're just trying to figure shit out through.
Yeah, it is. And I was one of the researchers, Craig Purdom. He's a tendon researcher. And actually, I guess one of my buddies kind of disagreed with him. But he said that horses are the only other animal that get tendinopathy. But I guess dogs can get it too. Huh. But it's like, if you look at it that way, then it's like, well, if we're researching rats and mice, you know what I mean? But he said this in a video, but I don't know if it's been disproven because I've heard people talk about rats and mice getting tendinopathy too. But it's like, yeah, that would be a big limitation, like we're, and also for us, like the way we're built and we're going, if we're talking jumper's knee, like how many other species of animal want to go and do something like dunk a basketball?
Never seen Fido dunk yet.
yeah, like that type of motion just isn't happening. So it's like, but I look at, we obviously have running as one, like movement as one of our main functions as human beings. So we can be very good at that, but it's like jumping, I feel like is so different because do we have to jump 50 maximal jumps in a day for survival? Probably not, but we might need to walk like 20 miles or sprint after something, you know what I mean? So I feel like the high volume of jumping activity is just something that's not natural to human beings, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah. I know this is a completely off the wall question, but have you looked at kangaroo anatomy?
No, I never have.
Because that's, I don't know, I have this weird thing where I'm not a comparative biologist at any stretch of the imagination, but I'm always fascinated by how some animals have just these hyper specialized capacities and just how they do stuff. So I'm just wondering, like, do kangaroos get like jumper's knee? Because they're like
Yeah,
jumping all the time.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Well, I feel like
I don't know how you would know.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like animals, I mean, it must be something that's like built in, like you figure it out, you know, like an animal is probably not going to get a tendinopathy. It'll just stop running for that day and rest, or maybe
Right.
walk around or something like that. But it is interesting to look at something like that idea. And we talk about doing isometrics when a human being gets tendinopathy. I wonder if people thousands of years ago knew that once they had a tendinopathy to do isometrics, you know? I don't think they
Yeah.
would have known that. What would they do? Would they just like do nothing, or just like do walking around to get blood flow, or would they just completely bed rest? I don't know what they would do, but they would have to have found something that works, you know. And it is weird that isometrics would be something like that, because you don't see animals going and doing a wall sit, you know, to figure out
No.
if something hurts. So I don't know why that is the case though. Why we would have our tendons run into those type of issues. But it seems like when Craig was talking about horses, like race horses, he said they only like will gallop the horses twice a week to
Hmm.
avoid tendinopathies. So for us, it would be like maybe if you're a sprinter or you're a jumping athlete, maybe you just do it twice a week, you know, like those type of high. Because if you're actually good at it, like a racehorse is very fast. If we're actually a fast human being or someone that can jump high, we probably shouldn't be doing that 7 days a week. Or if you do it, maybe do extremely low volumes, because it seems like tendons just can't handle it. That's what I asked Jill Cook on my podcast. I'm like, what can we do to accelerate tendons? She's like, they won't take any feedback from you. They don't care. They're not gonna speed
Really?
up the recovery. It
That's
was
what I've
interesting.
wondered about too, and I
Yeah,
haven't. Yeah. The only thing I've got is the collagen thing, which has
that's
been
what I think it
disputed.
would be actually, because the way Keith Barr talks about it is like, yeah, it seems like if you would supplement like the collagen to get the proline and the glycine in your bloodstream an hour before,
Yeah.
it seems like that might help like decrease degradation of your tendon, but I have no clue, and they haven't done that study. So all they've shown is that it increases those amino acids in the bloodstream, and then he talked about some cases where it actually was integrated into the matrix, but. I think that would be something where maybe that's happening, but the way he talks about doing multiple sessions, because the tendon adapts after like 10,
6
10 minutes
hours.
of activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get that rest, and then you can go and do like an isometric session. That could be a way, in my mind, to actually speed up the tendon. But you don't know if is that actually speeding up tendon recovery or helping the tendon, or is that just giving you an analgesic effect if you're doing like an isometric hold, because it can, you know what I mean? Like if you have a pain, it could just be decreasing pain, or just movement in general could be better for you. You know, that's one thing I think with like the PRI people that doing all these talking about like the pelvis is not set up, you can't stand on your left leg, and all this stuff is like people see results from that. How much of those results are just that someone's moving with variation? You know, that's what I think at least. I've never done PRI, so I shouldn't talk bad about it, but
Yeah.
it's like it seems to me that the way we're voicing it is like everyone is messed up and no one knows how to function properly as a human being. Like, are you serious? Like, I don't know how to breathe. Like, you know what I mean? It's just kind of messed up to me. So I'm like, people get results from it. I wonder how much of that is maybe they're paying someone a lot of money, so it's in their best interest to actually get results, or they're going to feel like they lost their money, or how much of it is just that they're going from doing nothing to doing something, or they're going from doing like maybe all you do is back squats bilateral. That's your only movement. You get no movement variability, and now I'm making you lay on the back and do like a little pelvic tilt, and now you feel better. You know, it's like maybe that's all you needed in the first place was variability. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what's hard. I mean, I've done what 4 or 5 PRI courses, and I think it's super interesting. Like, I think it's pretty solid, at least on the physiology. Is it kind of out on the bleeding edge of stuff? I think so. Am I a physical therapist? No. I mean, I remember taking the cranial course, and Ron was teaching it and sitting next to him, and after 2.5 days or 3 days or however long it was, maybe it was only 2 days, I left and went, okay, so I don't really know if I know anything now. I know a bunch of stuff I'm not sure about. I do know that when all else and shit fails, I'm going to ask them about occlusion to see where their teeth are. And sure as shit, like, again, could be anecdotal. Like the people that were completely screwed up, like their bite was completely screwed up too. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Put a piece of gum, your molars touch. Oh, their table tests are better. I'm like, what the hell? And then I'm like, maybe go see this dental person, and then I just refer them out to someone else. And most of the time, I never heard back from what happened with them. But I don't know. It's like, because I had the same thing. I had hip problems for quite a while. Went to standard physical therapy, did all their stuff, didn't make any difference. Went to a PRI person, ended up having prism glasses, the whole 9 yards. Like 9 months in, got rid of my hip pain. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And then you do stuff like through, Doug, where I was the vision guy. And now after 2 minutes of work and the world spinning around, I can now catch a ball for a while and see colors clearer. That's pretty trippy. So it's always amazing to me how I think the body is so survival based and so redundant that, like breathing, right? So I think breathing is a good example. If you were not able to breathe, you would be dead. Right, so your body has to figure out compensations, no matter the cost. It's got to figure out how to do that. But then if you're asking the question, is that the best and the most efficient way to do it? Maybe not. And then you go to the airport and you watch people move around and you just want to throw battery acid in your eyes because it's just so horrible. You're like, oh my God, but yet they're making it from point A to point B. You don't know how much pain they're in, but they're still doing it, and some of them maybe don't even have pain either, so it's, fascinating.
Yeah, it's have you read Anti-Fragile?
Yeah, I love that book.
Well, yeah, like that's
hard to
that's
get
really
through, but
that's changed my perspective on a lot of those things, where it's like let's say, for example, there's a guy, one of the world's best dunkers is named Jordan Kilgannon. I was talking to my buddy today about him. His vertical is probably like 40 inches, 50 inches, like something like that. But I'm like, he doesn't need to know his infrasternal angle, just go jump. So it's like the anti-fragile idea of like, you can intervene when there's a problem, but if there's no problem, let's not try to fix the dude, or let's not try to like nocebo him and give him fear that his body's messed up and he can't breathe. If he's doing fine, maybe we just leave him alone,
Yeah.
So that's what, like, I understand where it's like, the peer, and that's what I talked to Kyle Dobbs, and he was like, it's like
I love Kyle.
post-medical model or something, right? Like,
yep.
After someone has gone through stuff. So it's like, when you got healthy people, it's like, how much do we step in and try to correct things or try to like prehab them, nobody knows the answer, Yeah. And then you go back to someone's perception. Are they going to enjoy that, or are they going to be more fragile after you did it, because you educated them on how they can't move their rib cage and now they're fearful,
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Even working with higher level athletes, I always look at top NHL guy I worked with, a buddy of mine, said, hey, just come on over, look at this guy. We did some scar work on him, did some RPR. And he was like super high level, was pretty good. He's like, do you mind if we just check some vision stuff on him? I'm like, yeah, sure. So checking everything. He didn't tell me who this guy was. I didn't know who he was. And we found like one visual thing where if he was in this position and moved his eyes to the right, you could see his eye catch for a split second. I went back again, and it was completely gone. And I looked at my buddy, and I'm like, did you see that? He's like, yeah. And did you see that he corrected on the second rep already? He's like, yeah. So we couldn't find, this guy was like good to go. Guy leaves the session. He was great. I asked my buddy, I said, hey, who is this guy? He's like, well, he's one of the top NHL players in the league who's notoriously known for deflecting pucks mid-air into the net. I'm like, oh, okay. So if you're able to do that, whether that's prediction, you probably can't see the puck moving, whatever, you're probably a freak. You have really good vision, and you're really coordinated. We're probably not going to find a lot of shit wrong with you. You're just probably not. Otherwise, you would not be doing that. You just wouldn't, so yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have. Are you familiar with, there's a guys out there called GOTA. You ever heard of this?
No.
Well, they talk about being on like the outside edge of the foot and like pretty much never going in an area of pronation. But they talk I don't really, I kind of dislike them. I mean, maybe there's some beneficial stuff, but the way they carry themselves online is poor in my opinion. But they talk about LeBron James because you watch LeBron James, you've seen that photo of his feet, they're all
Yeah.
messed up, and he always turns his feet out.
Yep.
So he's on like the inside, he's probably on the inside edge of his foot all the time, and they talk about how bad that is for his hips and how bad that is for his Achilles. And the only reason why he makes it is because he spends millions of dollars on his body and he's genetically superior, so that's why he's never got, or he hasn't had injuries. And it's like, man, you can't make those claims, you know? You just don't know. Especially if you've never seen the dude in person, you never worked on him in person. Like, because his feet are turned out, maybe that's the best way for him to operate. And I don't know if we know any better to say that the human body needs to function in one specific way to avoid injuries and to avoid wear and tear. I don't think anyone is that smart. And whenever someone says they're that smart, it's like, man, you're wrong. And maybe you're just unhappy that you're not LeBron James or you're not working with him. I don't know.
Yeah, and the first thing that comes up to my brain is the old, I'm dating myself now, but the old video of, was it the Redskins quarterback, is RG3, where he's doing it was a jump or something, where his knees are literally like almost touching each other. And I remember just the shitstorm of a debate about that online. And who knows? I mean, he got injured later and he's kind of disappeared, so I don't know.
At the time, like, I wanted to look because they got that photo of him in the front, or the video, and I was trying to look at other NFL guys to see how common it was, but there's no photos or videos of anyone doing vertical jump like that. Like, how was it that they got Robert Griffin and that was it?
I know.
You know? Like, show me every other NFL guy, and maybe there's like, I don't know, 100 guys who look similar and they never tore their ACL. You know, that's what I would think. So it's like, to say that that's the cause, like, there are thousands of things that could have caused the ACL tear that we just say it's a biomechanics issue. Like, I don't think so. You know? Yeah.
You know,
how did he hurt it in the first place?
I don't remember. I want to.
Were they non-contact?
That's what I'd have to go back and look. Someone's screaming at their internet right now because I don't know. But I think it's a non-contact, but I could be completely wrong on that. But I also think of like Olympic weightlifters, right? They've got torque that goes through their knee. Right, you can see like an elite level Olympic weightlifters, you see their knees come in all the time. And there's some arguments that the torquing pattern is just a way to get more strength out of the movement. And I mean, last I looked, I don't see a lot of ACL tears in Olympic weightlifters that I know of, but maybe it happens. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the way I've been looking at it, because I did a Darian Barr. If you're familiar with a Darian Barr, he has a course called Rewire. Where he's a big fan of being on the inside edge of the foot. But if you just think of standing on 2 feet, pretty much regardless of where your feet are, unless your feet are like with more narrow than hip width, you're going to be on inside edge of your foot just for balance, you know?
Sure.
And if we say you play sport on 1 foot, you know, it's like, okay, just stand there and pick 1 foot up. You're going to have to go on the inside edge. You're going to fall over. So it's like, like the triangle type position where the knees are in a little bit. That's just balance. That's how you balance, because you have 2 legs, you know? Yeah. Why is this suddenly bad? And I don't know, when I came in, it was like Kelly Starrett talked about everything knees out. And I was for years like, you have to have knees out even when you're walking up and down stairs, you know, stuff like that. It's like so extreme. And it's like, dude, it's so stupid to me now, where it's like, but yeah, it's just balance. That's how I look at it. Like, if you're standing like that, we're going to say how bad it is. Like, how do you know that that's bad? Like, tell them to stand the other way, and now let's see how they perform in their sport. They're probably going to be worse.
Yeah. And then you go and think that if someone is thinking in a high-level sport, they're slow, right? Everything they're doing is just almost completely unconsciously wired. And for whatever reason, their body is just figuring out how to do that. And then if you have like football or something that's a contact sport, how do you ever really get solid statistics on injuries from it, right? Because you have a 330-pound dude that landed on you. You know, it's like non-contact stuff. I get, you know, a lot of females blowing ACLs and non-contact and turning. I get it. There's probably definitely something going on there. But now if you go into a contact sport, I know you can differentiate between contact injuries and non-contact injuries. But when you talk to any like NFL person at the end of the year, you know, they're just like, I feel like I've been through 14 car wrecks and I'm just trying to keep it together for Sunday. You know, so it's like, is it the accumulated trauma that caused something and the fatigue on top of everything else? And I don't know, just the amount of inputs are crazy.
Yeah, that's why to say like it's a biomechanical issue, like Man, there are thousands of reasons why they got hurt. Maybe they had an egg and they're allergic to eggs, and now their system's messed up.
Yeah.
Like who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, as we wrap up some stuff that's actually practical for people, um, if you if you're doing an isometric lunge, like what is your position to start in? So there's two cases: someone who has knee pain and somebody who doesn't, who may want to be doing this in order to perhaps prevent knee pain in the future.
Yeah. So like if you have knee pain, you just got to train in a position where there's no pain, basically. Like, and sometimes you can be in a deep, and mainly I'm talking about like anterior knee pain. Like I talk about patellar tendon pain, patellofemoral pain. If you have a meniscus issue or you have pain in the back, that's a totally different story.
Issue,
I don't know. Yeah, you might have to be doing something else. But everyone has like their specific ways, and this is the how-to of this. And I'm just like, I kind of follow the Dr. Tommy John thing, where it's like it doesn't matter, man. Do it how you want to do it, But what I've looked at recently is like if you have knee pain, you could have that rec fem thing where it's just locked up, and you can see it when someone's doing a split squat or a Bulgarian split squat or something, where they'll go down and their hip will stay anterior tilted. They're afraid.
Just go.
Yeah, they can't
get it back.
Yeah. So I think if you're someone like that and you're going in an iso lunge and you're doing the same thing where the hip is turning like that, I think you get more benefits to knee pain if you just get the hip more underneath you, like get it posterior tilted. So maybe that's not going to be as extreme of a gait pattern. Maybe that'll be more like shortened up. And it actually will probably be harder to hold that for longer because you basically will just feel the rectus femoris, like, or femoris, whatever. You'll feel that thing like tightened up and under a lot of tension. If you just go in anterior tilt, you won't even feel that, like you'll feel a lot less there. So it's like if we want to lengthen that thing out and you have knee pain, you should, when the knee is back, you should probably be doing the posterior tilt so that you get that thing like a strength and length benefit. But if you don't have that and maybe you're just going for max time because sometimes you just want to push yourself, I don't really care. Just go, let it go anterior tilt. I don't care. Just see if you can hold it for as long as you possibly can. And then I go like, the front leg, the heel comes up, so you get the Achilles, and I guess you'd be getting soleus too, because the soleus is pretty important in change of direction. Soleus can be important in knee pain, so you're getting a little bit like low-level soleus stimulus, which I think is big. And then you can do the pulling and the pushing type thing, where it's like you're trying to scissor your legs together. That will be the sensation of like the extreme iso lunge that Jay Shader talks about, is trying to scissor the legs together so you get that max contraction. But there are many, everyone talks about different ways of doing it. You can just go accumulate as much time as possible. Something I like to do is just accumulate like 3 to 5 minutes in a session. So maybe you do in sets of 1 minute, and you're just maintaining a good position. Cause as you go as long as possible, your position can just go to trash,
Yeah.
And your legs will start shaking and all this stuff. I actually saw that on my legs when I would get about 3 minutes. My Achilles would just start quivering, I don't know what that meant. It was kind of crazy. Like my foot would just go up and my heel would come up and down. No clue what that was, but could have been something beneficial. But yeah, you could do that max time. There is also the max contract where like you can go for 30 seconds as hard as you possibly can. You're squeezing it. That could be beneficial for someone who doesn't have any weights. You have no access to weights, so it's more of a
training effect per se.
Yeah, you're consciously trying to give as much effort as possible. But those are the ways I know about it. And ultimately, like if someone has a knee pain, like that can be beneficial. If you have a patellar tendon pain, you're probably going to be better off by getting on a leg extension type exercise, doing an isometric hold and that, because that's a way you can really isolate the patellar tendon. Because if you're doing an isometric lunge, there's so many other things that are involved. Maybe you're trying to get the pelvic position. You might fall over because you have balance. You might get tired on your hamstrings before something else. So it's like that's not the best way to isolate your patellar tendon. I used to think it was great, but it's not the best. And a leg extension as heavy as you possibly can on one leg is probably the best, or like a single leg press. Those are probably the best exercises, or even like heavy split squats are pretty good for patellar tendon. But yeah, bilateral stuff probably not, because if you have pain on one side, your body's going to compensate to shift it away from the painful side. So yeah, the isometric lunge though, that's what I would do. I look at it more so now for like that can be really beneficial for, both patellar tendon and patellofemoral. But for patellofemoral probably more so, and if you're in pain, don't go super flex position. But patellofemoral is an issue with the foot and the hips, probably an issue of strength endurance. So if you can improve strength endurance of those two areas, you probably get a lot better off in the patellofemoral over time. And strength endurance also affects patellar tendon at the foot and the hip. So just doing the isometric lunges and keeping them consistent, you might do them every single day, or you might just do them once a week just to make sure that you have the ability to hold it for a long time. And maybe that's 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. If you can hold straight in an isometric lunge,
that's way harder than I think people realize.
Yeah, it is. It is. And dude, I've had people be like, man, 5 minutes is too easy. I need to add weight. And I look at their video and they're like standing up straight. And it's like, that's not the iso lunge. Come on, man. But I think if you get to like a 2 minute, 3 minute, you're probably a lot less likely to experience anterior knee pain, in the patellar tendon or patellofemoral wise, because the foot, it's so much involved at the foot and the hip, and those two have to be connected. Instead of doing like an issue with the leg extension, your foot's not on the ground, nothing's really connected. All you're doing is training the patellar tendon. So you get an iso lunge, it's like an exaggerated gait pattern. I think it's very like functional, if we can say that term. But I think it can be super beneficial for everyone to avoid knee pain down the line. Just keeping that base of strength endurance at the foot and at the hip.
And the theory, according to Keith Barr, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if I'm doing like a wall sit, right, so I'm 90-90, most people would say, okay, it's isometric, so the muscle is not really moving. But my understanding is that the joint angle is not moving, but the tissue, the soft tissue, will have a creep effect over time, where imagine like the tendon is actually moving a little bit, so the muscle is still kind of contracting, and then you've got this shearing effect on the tendon, even though if we look at you from the outside, the joint angle is not actually moving. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what he talks about, is that if you do a wall sit, your quadriceps and your patellar tendon are lengthening, so to maintain the position, because you're staying in the same spot, your muscle would have to be working super hard to shorten. So basically the tendon, it's called tendon creep, stress relaxation, where the tendon actually gets very weak over time as you hold it, and the muscle has to work so much harder. That's why it burns so bad. Yeah. And that's a way that he talks about, if you have an area, like if you're a patellar tendon or even quadriceps, a wall sit's not a good exercise because that's too easy, I'm
just using that as an easy example for people to visualize.
Let's say you have a tendinopathy in your quadriceps or your patellar, you need to put a heavy load on it, and then you could hold a certain position, and you'll get the stress relaxation, which means that all the strong collagens are relaxing, and because they're relaxing, they're becoming super weak. So that's where the injured collagens can actually feel the stimulus, because outside of that time where you're doing an isometric, say you're a patellar tendon pain and you're a jumping athlete and you go dunk basketballs or something and you have pain, and it's like all you're doing is compressing the injured collagens. Right. And what he talks about, I just put up my podcast I did with him. He talks about they did a study where with the compression, I think it was on rats or something, they gave them tendinopathy. So this kind of goes against when I just said that. But maybe rats, maybe they did it with rats, maybe because they did like a stupid workload on them, whereas like a normal rat would not do that or something like that. I'm not sure.
They shock them.
But yeah, I don't know what it.
Squat.
Exactly. I don't exactly remember what it was, but he was talking about because you can have the collagen. The collagen within the tendon can be type 1 collagen. That's what you want. But if you go type 2, it's more like cartilage cells, which you do not want in your tendon. But if all you're doing as a jumping athlete is jumping and you have patellar tendinopathy, you're telling that area of degeneration to behave like cartilage cells, which are not going to help you transmit load.
Stiffer, right? You're promoting stiffness, quote unquote.
Yeah, and I don't think in a functional way that would actually be able to help you,
Right.
So if you want to so his idea is if you want to actually get any stimulus on that injured area, you have to hold an isometric, because you have to get the strong collagens to be weakened, because otherwise they're always strong if you jump, and they're just compressing the weak ones. So let's make the strong ones weak with the stress relaxation and the isometric holding, and then the weak collagens can actually feel the stimulus. They can start getting collagen to orient in the right direction, and that's how you get it to heal. And it seems like from him, that is the only way to do it. If you have a tendinopathy, the only way to heal it's not resting, because resting will just keep it the exact same. The only way to heal it is to do heavy isometric holds, and do it for a period of time, and then you'll get that area to reorganize. But the idea with Jill Cook and all the other tendon researchers is like do the isometrics for pain decrease, and then do the isotonics, the heavy isotonics, to increase the strength of the healthy tendon. So they have their method, he has his method. When I wrote my jumper's knee protocol, it took me so long to finish because I basically had to separate. I basically made two methods, their method and then his method. But you know what? I think both they clearly have stuck to their methods for a reason, because they've been able to experiment and they work with the populations they're treating. So it's like anyone can try. You can try just isometrics, or you can try a 4-stage process the other researchers lay out, where it's isometrics, isotonics, and then the fast stuff, and then return to play. But I like both of them. But I like Keith Barr's stuff for, it's like, for me, example, if I have patellar tendinopathy and sometimes it flares up, I was dunking at home in Wisconsin over quarantine, and I slipped on the court because the court was really low quality. And like my knee went like valg. It actually was pretty painful. So I don't know if that's what caused a little flare up there. But I've been having some patellar issues on my left knee. So it's like now is a case where I'm doing daily leg extension isometrics. But once I get that thing healthy, I think I can maintain my strength by just doing heavy split squats, I love doing split squats, Bulgarian split squats. If I keep that up, my rectus femoris stays strong and long. I'm getting a big stimulus on the patellar tendon because it's unilateral. I can't really shift the weight away from it. So I think for someone that has healthy knees already, if you just get extremely strong at split squats, that's probably a way to keep your knees healthy or your patellar tendons healthy in the long run. And then never change your load too fast by just saying, I'm going to go dunk for 2 hours today, and I haven't done it in a month. That's probably a way to flare up your patellar tendon, But I think split squats are a huge exercise that, like, you might not need to do all the other isolated stuff. You could do a compound exercise through a split squat and get a lot of benefits if you can be strong enough with it.
Yeah, and the last thing I've used isometrics for, I just added them again recently since I've been back home, is it's a super, I think, easy, low-risk way to see where you're weak. Right, because I realized I'm like, oh my God, like for me just to go to a simple 90-90 bottom position split squat, I was like shocked. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like such a weak pussy in this position. Like it was so hard compared to other positions. And I went back and looked at my training and I'm like, oh yeah, because I haven't really been training that. But I didn't have to do a 1-rep max test. I didn't have to do anything else crazy. It was literally just body weight. So I just looked at the time I could hold that and the RPE compared to other isometric positions I was playing with and went, wow, that's way harder than I thought. So I started working with clients now, just having them do a series of isometrics. I may include it in their assessment now. And like, okay, how long can you possibly hold each area? Send me a video. Because I also realize it's super easy to cheat, right? And you don't feel the cheating per se. It's a weird thing. So I was doing like a isometric with holding a bar and a cable close to me for a back exercise. And I closed my eyes and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm in the same position. Like 30 seconds later, the bar had gone out like probably about like 6 inches. But I was convinced it was still close. You know what I mean? So there's, I think, a change in perception. But I think it may be a easy way, low risk way just to kind of look to see maybe what pattern somebody is weak in too, if it's a new client.
Yeah, I definitely see it with people like with past injuries, with knee injuries or something, where you'll never see it. If you're just doing like heavy bilateral, like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, even split squats, like weighted, because split squat, you can just bounce out of the bottom,
Yep.
But it's like, if you get someone and they're super strong in the weight room, and then maybe these are cases where we're talking about, oh, they were so strong in the weight room and they still got injured. It's like, well, does that cover all the bases, So
Yeah.
like maybe you take that athlete and say, go in the bottom of a split squat, and they go 15 seconds and they're just on fire, and they can squat.
Sadly, that was me.
Yeah.
I can't squat 400
pounds.
but
It's like, that doesn't really make sense, So you clearly have a problem going on that you're hiding, because you're doing the normal like eccentric concentric reps where we at the bottom, you're just avoiding it because you're bouncing out of the bottom, So it's like, yeah, it is an easy way to put someone in the weakest position and then just be like, all right, hold it. Let's see what happens,
Yeah. Cool. Second to last question. Any good Cal Dietz stories you can tell in public?
Dude, I was only there. I was there for a summer. I was only there for a summer. And you know how Cal is, like, he's never really around.
I love Cal, but he's just such a character.
Yeah. he was never like there a whole lot. I think that was time when like RPR was starting to come out and
Yeah.
whatnot. So like his assistants were Matt Van Dyke and I think
Oh yeah.
Dan Warnke was there. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
those were guys that I was around more, or like asked more questions to. But no, Cal was kind of like I kind of felt like I don't know what I want to say because I read Triphasic and you like Cal's this big time dude and it's like you kind of feel like fearful, you know, like me as an intern coming in of like, oh, what's like I don't want to bother this guy, you know what I mean? But I can't think of any off the top of my head now.
Okay.
I was there for such a short period of time,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, he's just he is a different guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes he just yeah, he would I mean there's some things I've seen him do where it's like I look at now I'm like, man, I wish I could get away with doing that stuff, you know? Like it'd be like a hockey guy with like his hip would be hurting or something, you just lay him on the table and do like the chiropractic manipulation where like you pull the femur, you know?
Yep.
You pull the ankle
You
and
showed me that one.
yeah, and it's like I'm seeing him do it just out of nowhere on an athlete and I'm like, if I did that at my university, like I'd probably be having like hours of meetings of like you're stepping over your whatever, like you can't. That's not in your. What do they say that is? Like your. That's not in my job description.
Scope
What's the
of
term
practice usually.
Yeah, scope of practice. Yeah, it's not in my
Yeah.
scope of practice, but it's like, what is Cal's scope of practice? Anything he wants.
Yeah, and the weird thing, supposedly, and I have verified this, but it may have changed, that in Minnesota, like, so I'm in Minnesota, I can do hands-on work, even though I'm not a licensed LMT, because it's not licensed at the state level. Supposedly, joint manipulation is under the same area, because there's no cavitation. Paradoxically, if you're not trained, it's still legal. But if I went to chiropractic school, the second I enrolled in school and was not supervised, it is now illegal until I've graduated, and then it's legal again. So there's like really weird stuff like that. I'm not saying I should be doing this yay or nay, or that people should run around doing it, but it's, yeah. And so I know other friends who are in different states where they're a chiropractor, it's legal for them to adjust the neck, and it's not legal for them to adjust the joint. So there's just like weird like legalities that are just make no sense whatsoever. So
And you know what? Like I've never had the fear because I've never been like sued for anything like that. But it's like the thing Doug said. You know, like not that you do it here because you could like get sued for a lot of money if you did something you're not supposed to do. But it's like he gave like that African proverb where it was like it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, right? So I sometimes follow that where it's like I don't know, I want to try it out, you know, and it seems like that's what I like about Cal because it's like you don't have to follow the rules so much.
yeah.
But if you're gonna, I think here's what I think recently is like if you're Division I athletics and you're actually gonna get something done, you're actually gonna be successful. You can't follow all the rules.
No,
you know,
you
just can't do it. Like the amount of rules they set up and they say that it's for athlete safety and
so
for their
insane.
well-being and stuff. It's like, it's not really, it's just preventing them from being the best athlete they possibly can because you want to have some certain control or power over them. So it's like, I think the best teams, you can look at what they do if you're able to look at what they do and they do not follow the rules. They probably have so many things that they're going against through the NCAA and people just don't know about them, you know?
Oh yeah. Like the NCAA for years had the thing where you couldn't give an athlete that's why they had muscle milk collegiate because they had to put more carbohydrates in it because there was a limit on the amount of protein you could give an athlete. I'm like, we're not even talking about supplements. We're talking about freaking protein. Yeah. I'm like, what?
Dude, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it was like you have to have like a 2-to-1 ratio, right? Of like carbohydrate to protein. Like, where does this come from? Why can't I give them a straight protein shake? You know?
Yeah. It didn't come from anywhere because I had that question once and I spent months trying to figure out where it actually came from and wrote to them and asked them what their data was based on. And it was based on nothing. The best answer I got was that, well, we think that schools that have more money to spend because protein is expensive, that they would be able to give their athletes that, and other schools who don't have the budget would not be able to, and therefore that would confer more advantage to them already. And I'm like, have you seen some of the facilities some of these places have built? Like, I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Cool. Last question. So, people want to hear more about your programs and stuff. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm mainly on Instagram, Jake Tuura. It's with Tuura. My website's Jacked Athlete. I sometimes write articles, but mainly it's just been podcasts recently. And I've done mainly like patellar tendon podcasts, but I don't know if I'll be shifting soon to talk about other things. But my main interests are vertical jump development, muscle mass. I guess strength goes along with that. But that's kind of the whole idea, jacked athlete, to build muscle but also be athletic. So I've been trying to do all that for the last decade, and I've actually came quite a far ways where like I used to be just the worst athlete in the world, and now it's like I have like a near 40-inch vertical, quite a bit of
Nice.
muscle, quite a bit of strength. So it's like, and then the issue is I've had to change my like entire physiology, like and change my entire makeup. And then I got jumper's knee. Like that was the thing that happened for me was like
Oh,
just terrible jumper's knee. So it's like then I just created jumper's knee protocol because it's like I think the kids that are going to be looking at my stuff or the type of athletes, type of coaches looking at my stuff are people that maybe I think the reason I got into it is insecurity. Like I was a small kid, I was weak, I wasn't a good athlete, so I tried to turn all that around, and the training, all that stuff helped. But then it's like I got jumper's knee, so now I made this jumper's knee. That's why I have such an emotional connection to jumper's knee, because I had that for 3 years and I got such bad advice. So yeah, my programs are built around that. Hypertrophy cluster program is for building muscle, but also not like killing your athleticism, because if you just do a typical hypertrophy program, you're going to become like a block of wood who can't move. You're not going to feel good either. And then my vertical jump protocol is like pretty much straight, quite a bit of lifting, but like neurological development, like speed, like fast, explosive type training. And then jumper's knee is so that if you run into that type of issue, here is a supplemental thing you can do, is like heavy isometrics, or you can just understand as much as you possibly can about tendons, and then go make your own choices. But yeah, that's about me, man.
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the program and taking time out. And always good to chat with you. And I always like watching your Instagram when I'm actually on Instagram and seeing what's going on. And I love all the research on the tendon stuff. So I've been trying to follow a lot more of that lately because you find all sorts of the cool studies. And the podcast has been really good. I'll listen to the
Yeah,
Keith Barr one again coming up. So
yeah, I just put Keith Barr up, man. That was I asked him a lot of questions I got from, because I listen to all of his shows and then I have questions from that. But
yeah,
yeah, he's got really interesting stuff. Yeah, he does.
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was fun.
Cool. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast there with my buddy Jake Tuura, all about collagen and isometrics, RPR, and even tried to dig a Cal Dietz story out of him. This podcast is brought to you by the Flex Diet. Go to flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET.com. You'll be able to get on the wait list there and be notified as soon as it's open. If you want to learn all about the aspects of nutrition and recovery, I highly recommend it. Of course, I'm biased because I'm the one who created it. So that'll also put you on the newsletter there when you go to the waitlist. Anything you want to learn about body composition and performance, the newsletter is totally free. So go to flexdiet.com, FLEXDIET.com. And if you enjoyed this podcast, I would always appreciate a review. Again, just put whatever stars you feel this podcast has earned and any comments on iTunes. I would super appreciate that. That helps us play the little algorithm ranking games and hopefully gets us more exposure to other people that want and need to listen to it. So thanks again. Greatly appreciate it. Talk to you all very soon.